BOE2 just dropped their 0.4 update 2 to 3 weeks ago, I guess, depending on when this video finally comes out. And I just quickly wanted to run through the build that I've been running as my league starter that's gotten me through campaign and into endgame pretty damn easily. And if you'd rather skip me yapping for 10 minutes, that's totally fine. I've put together a pretty in-depth walkthrough over on Mobalytics that breaks down each act and how I progressed all the way to endgame. This is more of just like a brief overview of the build and showcasing some of its best features. One thing to note is at the time of recording, I'm around level 74, 75, so I'll definitely be updating the Mobalytics build as we progress further into the league and unlock better gear and more support gem slots. Now, if we look at the big old chungus of a patch note that GGG dropped before the 0.4 update, we can see that the Amazon Ascendancy for Huntress actually got a pretty nice rework. You can see that Elemental Surge was reworked and it now grants skill Elemental Surge. Now, when you consume a charge, you trigger Elemental Surge to gain 3 lightning surges. So I kind of saw this before the start of the league and I really wanted to try putting together a build that took advantage of that Elemental Surge node to help out with clearing screens and then blend that in with one of the new druid animal forms for some chunky single target damage. And after seeing good old oil barrage in action,
of all the things that could actually kill you, this is probably the closest.
Yeah, we settled on Wyvern. Okay, enough BS. Let me show you what skill, spirit, and support gems I ultimately settled on for this build. First up, let's talk about how I'm ad clearing. You unlock Lightning Spear pretty early on in Act 1, and I've been basically just spamming the hell out of this for most of my ad clear. For my Lightning Spear support gems, I'm rocking good old Lightning Attunement for that flat 25% buff to my lightning damage. And I'm taking Fork, which simply makes our Lightning Spear skill fork out and beef up that AoE damage. After that, we've got Rapid Attacks 2 for a flat 25% increased attack speed buff, and finally, we have Projectile Acceleration 3, which gives our projectiles 40% more projectile speed. On top of that, increases/decreases also apply to our projectile damage, so we're actually getting bonus damage based on how fast we yaw our spears. We've got some selections later on in the passive tree that will further boost our projectile speed, which will actually increase our damage even more. Alright, moving on, we're grabbing Storm Lance, which we'll mainly be using for thick bursts of damage and building up electrocution. As for support gems, we're grabbing trusty old Lightning Attunement again for that flat 25% extra lightning damage. Then we're taking Multi-Shot 2 so that we're actually firing an additional 2 projectiles at the cost of 25% less damage and 20% less skill speed. And finally, we're taking Electrocute to help us build up Frenzy Charges, which are a pretty big part of this build, and effectively wiping screens and leaving no skid marks. Another skill that we're going to be grabbing that's going to help us build up Frenzy Charges a lot more easy is Cold a Weak, so that when enemies are on low life, you can cold them to get a charge. They'll basically just get this blue ball, you stab them in their blue balls, and bam, you get a frenzy charge. For support gems, I'm rocking Charge Perfusion 2, which gives us a nice 30% chance to get an additional charge from culling, as well as a 15% chance to gain an additional random charge. On top of that, we're running Rapid Attacks 2 so that we can just cull quicker and get those lovely green balls as fast as possible. Now, as mentioned earlier, we'll be given Elemental Surge from our Amazon Ascendancy, giving us an automatic 3 lightning surges whenever we gobble up said green balls, giving us even more DPS when we combine the surge with our Lightning Spear or our Storm Lance. For our support gems, I'm grabbing Elemental Focus, which gives us a 25% buff to elemental damage, but it takes away our ability to afflict elemental ailments. Since our Lightning Spear is shocking enemies and our Storm Lance is electrocuting enemies already, I really don't give a damn about this. Our ailments are already being applied by other skills, so I don't really care if we're losing out on that on Elemental Surge. Next, we've got Elemental Armament 2, which just gives us another flat 25% buff to elemental damage, and finally, Lightning Mastery, which gives us +1 level to all supported lightning skills. When it comes to clearing screens, we've actually got 2 spirit gems directly tying into our damage loop: Herald of Thunder and Combat Frenzy. Herald of Thunder states that while active, killing shocked enemies with a non-herald attack hit will cause subsequent attack hits to release lightning bolts, which deals attack damage to all surrounding enemies. So, I mean, this is just going to grant us bonus DPS as we shock enemies with our lightning spear spam. For our support gems, I'm taking Concentrated Area, which gives us 30% more area damage in exchange for 50% less AoE, as well as Blind 2, which will debuff any enemies that we tag up with our Herald skill with 40% less accuracy and evasion rating. Next up, we have Combat Frenzy, which will essentially just give us a frenzy charge when we successfully electrocute any enemies with our Storm Lance. Right now, I've just got Charge Perfusion 1 slotted in there, but we'll probably add in some more support gems and update the Mobalytics build as I progress more through the league. Alright, so with our ad clear aspect out of the way, let's talk about our single target damage with our Baby Dragon, which is by far the coolest aspect of this build. We're of course going to be running Rend, which is just the intrinsic melee ability for the Wyvern, where you just bitch slap the life out of enemies with your wings. Now, we're taking Rage 2 on this, which will give us 5 rage per melee hit that we deal. Next, we're taking Rapid Attacks 2 for that 25% increased attack speed, which will help help us build up rage even faster. After that, we've got Close Combat 2, which will give us 30% extra attack damage to any enemies that are within 1 meter of us. And finally, we're grabbing Stun 2, which gives us an extra 70% stun buildup to enemies. Now, I'd say this and Rage are perhaps the most important aspects of the build, since we're kind of relying on our Rage bar and stun buildup to perform a chunky DPS on bosses. To help out with stunning enemies, we're grabbing Wing Blast, which will heavy stun enemies that are primed. You'll see this like piss yellow orb appear on them, which will just indicate that they're ready to be suplexed after you've built up enough stun. And then once you successfully stun, you'll actually have a 15% chance to get a power charge. Honestly, that Rend Wing Blast combo has been pretty nice for getting out of tricky spots in the map where you're kind of getting swarmed. One Rend swipe will actually prime most white bar ads, at least from what I've seen, and then you can kind of push yourself away from those ads with Wing Blast, which will just create a little bit of space if you're finding yourself in a bad spot. Anyways, we are grabbing Heavy Swing first for this one, which allows us to deal 35% more melee physical damage at the cost of 10% less attack speed. Next up, we've got Armor Break 3, which will break armor equal to 20% of physical damage dealt. I found this to be pretty nice for some of those heavily armored enemy archetypes that I run into while I'm map clearing. Finally, we're taking Rapid Attacks 1. You really don't need to use this, but to be honest, I'm out of extra support gems at the time of recording this, so F my Chungus life. Now, for the fun part. We are snagging Oil Barrage, which will allow us to projectile vomit on enemies and will increase the attack's duration and damage based on the amount of power charges you have. The damage on this is honestly pretty stupid, and I wouldn't be surprised if GGG nerfs this in a coming update. Please do not, I worked really hard on this build. For support gems, we're first taking Rage Forge 1. This will take the rage that we built up from sucker punching bosses and convert it to 35% more damage for our barf. We're then taking Projectile Acceleration 3 for the same reason we took it for Lightning Spear, since Oil Barrage is technically classified as a projectile skill. Next up, we've got Virgin 2, which gives us 20% more damage per second spent channeling the skill, up to a max of 40%. Oil Barrage is also tagged with channeling, so in this case, it makes sense for us to use something that is going to give us more damage over time. Finally, we are taking Ambrosia 2. This skill will basically drain charges from our mana flask, but will give us 1% extra lightning damage per charge that we use. Now, since we're using this skill with power charges, Oil Barrage will get 40% of its physical damage converted to lightning damage. Hence, using this skill will just further buff our lightning damage output. Now, I know what you're wondering. How do we get blue balls? Well, other than the obvious answer.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
This can be accomplished in 2 ways. Devour is probably what I would recommend you use early game, so as soon as you unlock that skill, I would just go ahead and slap that on. This will let you cull enemies that are kind of like low on life, or feast on any enemies you've killed to grant you power charges. The main issue that I was running into was that for bossing, there really aren't always ads in the area that you can gobble up to get instant charges. So that's when I started searching for other ways to get them and ultimately settled on a Monk Spirit Gem, Lingering Illusion. Now, whenever you dodge, you'll create this James Cameron-ass looking blue copy of yourself. If enemies destroy this clone, it'll drop a remnant with a 44% chance to create 2 remnants. Whenever you pick these up, you'll be granted power charges, and this has been a lifesaver for me in the boss fights where literally 0 ads spawn and allows me to get pretty consistent uptime with my Oil Barrage. For support gems here, I threw on Herbalism 2 for the 50% extra life recovery from flasks while a clone is active, as well as Empowered Sparks 2. Anytime we generate a power charge, our next 3 attacks will be empowered. 2 final skills I'll briefly touch on are Parry and Disengage. I'm not using these skills hardly at all outside of boss fights, but they're nice for helping build up a little extra stun and also generate frenzy charges to help with electrocution buildup or deal out a little extra DPS outside of your Oil Barrage should you need it. Next up, let's take a quick look at our passive skill tree. I'm not going to get too into the weeds on this because you can check out the Mobalytics guide to kind of scroll around and see exactly what I took for everything, but let's start with the Amazon Ascendancy. We of course are taking Elemental Damage and Elemental Surge first. After that, I took Stalking Panther to boost my evasion originally, but after trying out the Predatory Instinct node, which reveals weaknesses against rare and unique enemies, allowing you to deal 50% more damage against enemies with an open weakness, I ended up opting for this with my second set of Ascendancy points just to try and help with boss melting. Whenever I get my last set of Ascendancy points, I'm probably just going to end up going for In for the kill and then go back to Stalking Panther just to keep my evasion high. As for some of the more notable passive tree selections, I would highly recommend committing some points to anything that buffs your frenzy charges. For me, this was through the Frenzied Bear and Savagery nodes. The Frenzied Bear gives us 30% increased damage if you consumed a frenzy charge recently, 10% increased skill speed if you've consumed a frenzy charge recently, and plus 10 to our strength. On top of that, Savagery gives us 50% increased evasion rating if we've consumed a frenzy charge recently, and plus 1 to our maximum frenzy charges, so we'll be able to have a total of 4 green balls floating around us at any time. On top of that, any nodes that increase your elemental damage so that we can pump out extra lightning damage are always nice. I also mentioned projectile speed earlier and how we're getting bonus damage from our speed, via projectile acceleration 3, so I opted for a few nodes here to buff our projectile speed. Also mentioned earlier was stun buildup, which we needed a lot of for our Wyvern, so I grabbed a few stun buildup nodes to help out with quicker stuns on some of those bossier enemies. With regards to my attributes, you actually do need a fair bit of strength and intelligence to wield the talisman and equip Wyvern skill gems, so I was pretty much just grabbing the bare minimum of what was required to wield those and then dumping anything else that was left over into dexterity. One final note on the skill tree: be sure to allocate your weapon set skill points accordingly. My weapon set 1 is my spear, so I grabbed some projectile damage and lightning penetration nodes, while my weapon set 2 is my talisman, so I grabbed some extra melee damage and stun buildup nodes, as well as a few projectile ones here and there to buff oil brush. All right, finally, let's chat about gear. I by no means have like what I'd consider a perfect set of gear for this build yet. One thing for sure to keep an eye out for though is either a chest piece or amulet with some additional spirit on it, so that you can run all of the spirit gems that we mentioned earlier. You'll need roughly 90 spirit minimum just to run all 3, so as you're running through the axe and the interlude, just keep an eye out for one of those pieces so that you can equip it and be able to run all 3. Now for your spear, you're going to want to be taking anything that adds fizz or lightning damage, and things like attack speed or crit chance / damage don't hurt either. On my talisman, percent fizz is a 100% must, along with stun buildup, and attack speed is also nice for helping build stun and rage quicker. Outside of that, it's really dealer's choice in how you want to build out your gear, but if you really want to copy me one for one again, I've got my Mobalytics build below where you can see every stat I'm currently rocking on my gear. Again, I am by no means done perfecting my gear for this character. I just got to endgame like a few days ago, so we're just still kind of tinkering with our build, trying to roll god tier weapons and praying for some good RNG drops as well. All right, guys, that will just about do it for this build. If you made it this far, really appreciate you sticking around. And if you've got any suggestions for me to make this build even better, let me know down in the comments, or feel free to swing by our Twitch. We're live most evenings there and would love to have you. Be sure to like and sub, as we'll be pumping out a few more builds throughout the course of the 0.4 update, and I will see you guys in the next one.